So this week I meal prep lamb souvlaki for my family's lunches. We usually order Greek takeout, so I thought why not make something healthier and homemade? This is definitely one of my tastiest meal prep recipes, and way better than any takeout I've ordered. I'm looking at you, Mr. Greek. I've grilled these skewers directly over charcoal on my grill. This gave them a nice smoky flavor, but without any extra calories. Speaking of calories, these are actually pretty calorie friendly for how good these are. Grilling them allows the fat in the marinade and the meat to drip off. And better yet, when this fat drips off, it drips directly onto the charcoal, which turns it into puffs of delicious smoke. I'm going keto, so I'll show you how to make a nice Greek salad and tzatziki sauce to go with these. But if you want some carbs, feel free to add in a potato or some rice. This whole meal comes in at about 600 calories per serving, and I'll also have a full detailed macro breakdown for you at the end. Okay, so I started by prepping the lamb. I'm cooking 5 meals for about 2.5 people, so I used a fairly large piece of meat. I used boneless lamb leg, and this piece was about 5 pounds. If you're cooking just for yourself, I would say use a 2 pound piece of meat, and this should be sufficient. Usually, you won't find lamb legs that small, so you may want to go for a lamb shoulder or another piece of lamb that's comparable in terms of macros. I got a deal for this in Costco, but if you're buying it directly from a butcher, you can just ask them to cut it up for you and save yourself some time. I started off by breaking down the lamb into smaller chunks to make it easier to work with. I'm looking for slices no more than an inch thick. It doesn't have to be perfect cubes. If you want to drop the calories a bit, you can also trim off some of the extra fat. I did not because when you grill the meat, some of the fat renders and drips off anyways, and I always weigh out my portions. Okay, so once all the meat was prepped, I moved on to the marinade. Okay, so I started out by adding in about 2 to 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. Remember that because we are going to be grilling the meat, literally all of this oil will drip off. Then I minced one whole head of garlic. Here's a meal prep pro tip: use pre peeled garlic. You can find this at most grocery stores, and it tastes better than any bottled or garlic powder that you'll use, and it'll save a ton of time from peeling garlic. I then added the juice of 3 lemons. If you want to work on your forearms, you can squeeze out all of this by hand, but I ain't about that life, and I just use a citrus juicer. I cut up the lemon into eighths just to make sure I could press it all down in my citrus press. I also added slices of a half an onion. Again, so this is just for the flavor and the marinade. I then added about 2 tablespoons of dried oregano and the leaves of about 4 to 5 stalks of fresh rosemary. If you don't have fresh rosemary, don't worry about it. Dried rosemary is fine and might actually work better for this. I also added about a tablespoon of cumin and smoked paprika. These are not traditional ingredients in souvlaki, but I really like the flavor that they added to this dish, so I added them. I finished this off with just some salt and pepper for seasoning. Based on my taste, I used about 1 tablespoon of salt and ground pepper, but you may adjust this based on your preference. Now give it a good mix and make sure that the marinade is evenly distributed. So you can let this meat sit to marinate right now as is, but I wanted to finish everything that I needed to do in the kitchen in one go, so I put these on skewers as well. These can marinate on the skewers if you leave them in the fridge overnight covered with some cling wrap. For meal prep purposes, I usually marinate several proteins the night before and cook them the next day. Okay, so now on to the tzatziki sauce. Full disclosure, if you're in a hurry, you can just pick up a pack of pre-made tzatziki sauce from your grocery store. This will be fine for meal prep purposes. I usually do this as well, but I wanted to show you how I make it when I have some extra time and if I want control over what goes into my food. It actually is really straightforward and only requires 5 ingredients. I started off by measuring about 500 grams of Greek yogurt, which is about 2/3 of this large container. I usually go with a 2% milk fat Greek yogurt because the non fat kind has kind of a grainier texture, which I don't like, and the 2% is almost the same in terms of calories and protein. I added 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. If you want to cut calories, you can use less. I also added 3 tablespoons of red wine vinegar. If you don't have any, you can substitute for lemon juice. I then grated 1 clove of garlic. Be careful with this one. If you use more, your coworkers will kind of start to hate you. I gave this a good mix until everything was incorporated. Now I added in the cucumber. You can grate the cucumber as is, but the flesh has a lot of water in it, and it'll make the tzatziki sauce watery, especially if you're meal prepping and let it sit for a few days. To avoid this, I actually scoop out the flesh and the seeds and just grate the rind. All the flavors in there, anyways. So mix it in with the yogurt, and we're done. One out of the two sides are done. Like the tzatziki sauce, if you're in a hurry, you can just buy a pack of Greek salad from the store. I'll show you how I make it when I meal prep. Let's start by cutting up some cucumbers. For my meal prep, I used about 2 large English cucumbers. This should be enough for about 5 salad servings. I then chopped up about 5 tomatoes. I switched from the mandolin to a knife because these tomatoes were a bit soft, and if I'd used the mandolin, it would have just squished them. Then I switched back to the mandolin and sliced up one onion. I made sure the slices were pretty thin because I don't like big chunks of onion in my salad. Okay, so now for the olives and the feta. Typically, I use about 10 olives per serving of the salad and about 50 grams of feta cheese. You can use more or less depending on your personal preference or if you want to adjust your calories. Okay, so now that we've prepped everything and the meat has had some time to marinate, let's get to cooking. So I cook my lamb skewers on my grill, but you can also cook them in your oven or in an air fryer. I use a charcoal grill. I like this because it gives the meat a nice smoky flavor if you throw in some wood chunks, and more flavor without calories is fine in my book. It's also really big. I usually have no problem cooking all my meal protein in one go, and it also gets really hot, so you can cook things up really fast. But for me personally, it gets me outside, so that's a win in my book. And it's also a win for the mosquitoes. Okay, so the first thing I did was start up my grill. So for me, this was lighting the charcoal. The grill I'm using is a Weber Kettle, and it's a really great starter charcoal grill. The most common way to light charcoal is with lighter fluid or with a charcoal chimney, but I'm a man of speed, so I'm just going to use a flamethrower. This gets it all nice and hot in about 5 minutes. Once the coals are lit, I put the lid on to get the grates nice and hot. Cold grates equals sticking. Once the grates were heated, I added some cooking spray for non-stick and then put my skewers on. The key here is to cook them indirectly from the hot charcoals in the center, so I put them just on the outside. These skewers are a bit clunky. Next time I'll stick with the smaller wooden ones and won't get fancy. Now I put the lid back on and let these skewers sit for about 20 minutes. These should get them cooked fully through and well done. When I meal prep, I fully cook my meat because I'm not comfortable with letting medium rare meat sit in the fridge for a few days. Also, after about 20 minutes, I put the skewers on the hot center to get a bit of an extra char before I took them off. This just adds more flavor. Okay, so now that the skewers are cooked, let's take them in and pack our boxes. Okay, so for each box, we're going to have 200 grams of cucumber, 100 grams of tomato, 10 grams of onion, 25 grams or about 6 olives, 50 grams of feta cheese, between 150 to 175 grams of lamb souvlaki. This works out to be about 1 whole to 1 1/4 full skewer. And lastly, just sprinkle on some oregano on the salad for seasoning. If you want a low calorie Greek dressing, you can also sprinkle on some lemon juice and minced garlic, and you'll have something that tastes like a Greek salad dressing, but without the extra added oils. Alrighty, and as promised, here is the total calorie and the macro breakdown for this meal.